Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? I hope you are doing well. And I am going to try not to chat too much at the beginning of these shows because I expect that this particular episode might get more than my typical viewing audience, but I am going to do a little bit. Went out today and did my signs, but let's just move on. I did videos on that on Facebook. If you're interested, I'll probably upload them up to YouTube. Along the bottom is my shameless grifting. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider becoming a patron. Things are rough out there for YouTubers, so that's patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. And of course, all super chats matter. Now, we're just going to get right into the content. I want to give a little bit of an introduction here, and I do have drinks lined up because I have a feeling I'm going to need them. We've got 3 shots. We got 3 shots at 20% alcohol content lined up, so the show might get more interesting as it goes on. But I forgot to bring a notebook because sometimes when I'm watching these videos, I go, oh, I want to mention this, and I'm getting old and I forget. I have yet to watch the entire Ben Shapiro video. I wanted to give you guys it won't be entirely contemporaneous reaction because I have watched some of it. I watched enough of it to know that there's a lot wrong. It would be pretty presumptuous to entitle the video the way I did on how Ben Shapiro is completely wrong about libertarianism if I didn't watch any of it, because how do I know what he's going to say? And I have seen portions of Dave Smith's critique also. I also didn't watch the entire Dave Smith critique because I wanted to give my own. And I find Dave and I have a lot of the same criticisms a lot of the time, so it won't surprise me if there's a big overlap, but there might not be a complete overlap. And here's why. Dave is much more socially conservative. I don't mean that as a political ideology. I mean that as a personal preference than I am. I also come from a different school of radical thought than Dave. So we do diverge in some ways, but who knows? We may have a lot of the same opinions. You guys who have watched both shows, you can give me feedback in the comments. I do want to see your points in the comments, which is why I didn't pre-record this. I had considered watching it, taking notes, pulling out clips and doing something a lot more organized, but I decided, nah, I like live streaming. We're going to watch it. I'm going to stop, give my commentary. And of course, I've already forgotten, and I don't mean this by any disrespect, the gentleman that Ben is talking to. You know what? Let me look that up right now because I like using people's names. I do think it's a sign of respect. So what did Ben call this? I'm just going to look up Ben Shapiro Libertarianism. I don't know why I keep having such a mental block with his guest name. Oh, Vivek Ramaswamy. Let me write that down. We'll just call him Vivek because that last name is a mouthful for me. Ramaswamy. Is that right? I don't want to mispronounce his name. Okay, but before we even play the video, it is hugely encouraging to me that we're becoming part of the conversation. Some people may go, why, they're misrepresenting us. Why are you happy about this? Here's a fact of political life. Intentionally, unintentionally, due to blinders, due to not understanding, opposing political views always get misrepresented. We libertarians, I'm sure, misrepresent other people, and it's not always intentional. So the critique I'm giving of Ben Shapiro now, I am not trying to imply that he is being purposely deceptive or purposely misrepresenting anyone. When it comes to commentators from the right, I think Ben Shapiro does usually a pretty good job. Now, I'm obviously not from the right, so he doesn't scratch where I itch, but I do think he's one of the better commentators from the right. And I listen to commentators from all spectrums. A lot of times it's for material for the show, but also it's to try to understand where other people are coming from. And I've critiqued Ben before. I think he's gotten a lot of things wrong before. And some people will say he's being deliberately deceptive. I don't think that. I just don't. Sorry if that gets you upset. But we have been getting a lot of attention. So I take that as we're a threat and we're entering the big time. We did not get this much attention from, I don't want to call it mainstream because it's not mainstream, but we can call it the mainstream of the alt stream, if that makes any sense. Of alternative media, we are getting a lot of attention. So let me crack open one of these. Let's prime the pump here. This drink is called Porn Star. I'm not so sure that's the most appropriate thing to be drinking while watching Ben. Ooh, that smells strong. Ooh. And you notice I got the blue lipstick on to match my blue Libertarian shirt and the blue liquor in here. Oh, that's good. You want to know what it tastes like? Do y'all remember Astro Pops? That's from back in the day. That tastes like an Astro Pop. Okay. We're not going to have comments up on the screen when we're watching the video. Unfortunately, it just takes up too much screen real estate. I will put up on the screen any real pertinent comments that come up. Of course, Bunchy will be with us always. Bunchy is always with us. So let's go, and I'm going to be starting and stopping. This is a short video by Ben. It's 10 minutes, which means I could probably talk about it for 10 hours, but I won't. But it's a relatively short video by him. So let me switch the screen here, and we will hit play. So
I've been reliant in my own ideology more and more on the idea that you can only have, that universalism essentially doesn't apply, that particularism is the way to go. What I mean by this...
By levels of government.
Yes, exactly. That you can do a lot of things at the local level in terms of government, in terms of community building. All that stuff is not off the table. Like, the libertarian ideal doesn't apply at the very local level because...
Okay, already he doesn't make any sense. So I know he talks really fast, but he's like, the libertarian ideal doesn't apply at the local level because you can do a lot of things at the local level, such as community building. What in there had anything to do... Oh, the video's much louder than me. Let me see if I'm not so sure I can fix that. Let me see. That should have just boosted my volume there, did it? Let me know. I'm going to hit over here. I'm looking, if you wonder why I'm looking off to the side. And let me pull that one down a little. You'll have to let me know how this goes when we continue. Okay. So, he already didn't make any sense. So, he's like, the libertarian ideal doesn't fly at the local level. Okay, he's going to explain it more, but he really just starts going off the rails. I wish he had defined what he thought libertarianism is, because we're going to have to guess by what he says. Now, let me know if I'm going to need to pull down the volume on his video a little bit, because I can do that.
The fact is that you and your friends, when you have an HOA, there are tons of restrictions that you live under as an HOA, and I live in my local Jewish community. There are all sorts of social restrictions that we put in place with regard to one another that violate kind of libertarian prescriptions. If we...
What? Okay. He didn't do this, but I'm going to do this so we're clear. Libertarianism is a political philosophy. It is not a complete worldview of how you live your life in every single sphere. It is a political philosophy that says that the only rights are negative and that the use of initiatory force to achieve social or political goals is always unjustified. That's all it is. So Ben went on to talk about, and it's a philosophy about the state. It's a philosophy about government. It does have some bearing on interpersonal relationships. Obviously, interpersonal violence also isn't justified. But libertarianism is a political philosophy. Okay? Its realm is in the political realm. Ben went on to talk about HOAs, which, okay, that could have some impact with the state because they're creatures of the state, they're corporations, but that isn't what he meant, because he went on also to say, and my Jewish community, we have certain rules and social expectations that violate libertarian norms. How? Having a voluntary religious society that is a private organization that decides... Richard, no, he doesn't. I'm sorry. I'm like, ooh, a bird. I'll put your comment on the screen because his take is very interesting. But unlike the local synagogue thing, there's nothing more libertarian than that. He seems to think that libertarianism means no rules. No, it doesn't mean that. It means you can't force your will on other people who haven't consented to that arrangement. but that also means that someone who's not Jewish or doesn't hold to the form of Judaism that you hold can force their way into your synagogue. The voluntary Jewish community that you just described is actually a perfect example of a libertarian community. He seems to think that social norms and enforcing social conventions through social pressures, or saying, no, we don't want you in our synagogue, we don't want you in our private club, is somehow un-libertarian. And that is, I can't think of any. Now, please know that when I say any, there's going to be crackpots out there that are on the fringes. But when we're talking about any major view within libertarianism, nobody would deny that. In fact, let's just go to the Libertarian Party platform. And I think referring to the party here is apropos, because if you go to this video by Ben, in the thumbnail, he actually has the logo for the Libertarian Party in it, which made me really happy, even though he was misrepresenting what we think. So the context that he purposely chose for this video is the Libertarian Party. So I don't need to speak about libertarianism writ large. I get to speak about the party. And it's right in our platform that private organizations have every right to choose whatever levels of freedom of association that they want. This is libertarianism 101. Like, what? You know, this is just a bit crazy. I want to put Richard's comments on the screen. So Richard had said, I guess I misunderstood him because I thought he said libertarianism is more local. No, most people, when they're discussing libertarianism, do say that. He actually says, and he'll get into this, but I like to prime the pump because, again, he talks so fast that you might not, might go a little, because he just goes so fast. He believes that local, he's not going to use this word, but I'm using this word, that you can be more authoritarian when you're dealing with local governments because most people in a local community share common values and they won't find it to be authoritarian. They'll find it just to be what they're comfortable with. But as you get more distant, as you become more national in government, you have to become more libertarian because everybody is so different and it's impossible to create rules that everybody will be comfortable with. Now, that is a unique take. I don't find any kind of difference between the two because he's coming at this somewhat from a utilitarian point of view. I think he'll use a different term, but it's basically a utilitarian point of view. Whereas libertarianism says, no, human freedom is a good in and of itself at every level. So, let's continue. But he's right off the bat, and it's difficult because he doesn't define his terms, but from what we can gather from what he said, he doesn't understand libertarianism.
One of our kids doing something wrong, I notify my friends. If somebody falls short, I'm giving charity to their family. If I know that somebody's doing something wrong, I go to them and I chide them. We have people who just are not welcome at the synagogue because they violated the social precepts.
The communitarian model works at the level, like if the family is the fundamental unit.
Okay, so notice he's continuing with saying examples of what he thinks violates the libertarian ideal. We can even go back and play it because I interrupted it, and I think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to go back and let him, so you realize I'm not misrepresenting what he said. Like, he's claiming that if he sees somebody's kids doing something wrong and he goes and tells their parents, this is somehow violating a libertarian ideal. No, this is like peak libertarianism, that you don't need the state to do this, that the communities will look out for each other. Okay, and charity, like voluntary charity, he somehow thought, what? But let's go. We're only 50 seconds in. I'm going to go back to the beginning. Let him speak for this 50 seconds straight so you can see I didn't misrepresent him, and then we'll pick up back after 50 seconds.
I've been reliant in my own ideology more and more on the idea that you can only have, that universalism essentially doesn't apply, that particularism is the way to go. What I mean by this...
By levels of government.
Yes, exactly. That you can do a lot of things at the local level in terms of government, in terms of community building. All that stuff is not off the table. Like, the libertarian ideal doesn't apply at the very local level, because the fact is that you and your friends, when you have an HOA, there are tons of restrictions that you live under as an HOA, and I live in my local Jewish community. There are all sorts of social restrictions that we put in place with regard to one another that violate kind of libertarian prescriptions. If we see one of our kids doing something wrong, I notify my friends. If somebody falls short, I'm giving charity to their family. If I know that somebody's doing something wrong, I go to them and I chide them. We have people who just are not welcome at the synagogue because they violated the social precepts.
The communitarian model works at the level, like if the family is the fundamental unit. And
okay, so that's exactly what I want. You could see I didn't misrepresent him. He claimed that all of those things violated a libertarian ideal, including voluntary charity. Like, if I wanted to be really disrespectful here, I'd be like, are you smoking crack? There was a funny insult that I found on IPR. It was a memory from like 5 years ago, and I posted it on Facebook, where somebody was just being really obtuse at IPR, and we said, the libertarian position is that all drugs should be legalized, but that doesn't mean you should be taking them all at once. We apologize for any lack of clarity on that point. Ben, like, what? That made no sense. But you said it with such authority, without stuttering, in your typical shotgun way, that made it sound like you knew what you're talking about. But with all due respect, Mr. Shapiro, you have no idea what you're talking about. That was so wrong, it wasn't even right. You know what I mean? It's like so wrong, there isn't even a word for it. But now, let's continue, because he is going to say, I'm on Twitter. Let me just put it this way. With my next statement, realize I'm saying this statement with the full knowledge that I read Twitter every day. He's going to say one of the dumbest things I've heard this year. And I'm on Twitter. I read a lot of dumb things. He's going to say something that just stinks up the place. If you're prone to getting angry or throwing things, trigger warning. That's all I can say. Let's go, because he's going to say something so incredibly stupid. As a conservative, he should know better. Never mind knowing libertarianism. This is a dumb thing to say from a conservative point of view.
That it's sort of like...
Families are communist.
Right?
He just said families are communist. Let's back that up. I'm going to let him continue. He's going to explain why he thinks families are communist. That is barking moonbat stupid. But let's go back. We're at 49 seconds. Let him just go through that and explain why he thinks families are communist.
The fundamental unit, and that it's sort of like...
Families are communist, right?
Exactly,
You have a joint bank account with your wife,
communist
right?
to communitarian to...
Okay. He said families are communist because you have a joint banking account with your wife. Well, who knew that's what communism was? You know what? Maybe I was wrong about that commie stuff. If that's all it is that if families are communist because you have a joint checking account with your wife. Does he think, and I hear Wayne is listening to my show upstairs and there's a 10-second delay and I can hear me coming through. Wayne, I can hear you up there. He's going to get that in like 10 seconds. Turn it down, Wayne. Families are communist. Okay. Does Ben think that voluntarily pooling resources together for a common goal where no one forces another person, does he think that's what communism is? Because if that's what it is, I'm all for it. But that's not what communism is. And this has nothing to do with him not understanding libertarianism. In this comment, he doesn't understand communism. And one thing I thought libertarians and conservatives had in common is that we both understood and despised communism. But families are communists? No. The other guy kind of had it a little right, but he was nodding along. They conflated communitarianism with communism. It's not the same thing. Communitarianism is strictly voluntary. Communism is not. But let's continue. That was mind-blowing.
And then as you abstract up, then on a practical level, because there is no brotherhood of man, because Americans hold less...
I want to stop again there. Maybe I don't understand Judaism that well. I am a Christian. That's part of the heritage of the Christian faith. We sprung out of Judaism. But I thought part of Judaism was a belief in the brotherhood of man. Am I wrong, or is it different with different branches? I don't know, but I was kind of shocked to hear him say there is no brotherhood of man. In my view of the Bible, we all came, like, whether you believe in a literal Adam and Eve or not, the lesson, at least, of it is that we all sprang from one place, and that things like race and country are artificial, that we are all just humans in the image of God, that the brotherhood of man is like fundamental to the Judeo-Christian tradition, at least as I thought. I will disagree with him. I do believe in the brotherhood of man, but maybe we're just using those terms differently. Maybe I'm just coming at this from too much of a Christian perspective and not understanding it from a Jewish perspective.
And then Floridians hold less in common than people who live in my area. That as you abstract up the chain, if you wish to live together in a common polity, you're going to have fewer rules. You can't have as many rules because there's just less for us to agree on. And ironically...
Okay. The exact other argument can be made, which most people do make, is that the higher up you go where people are more disparate, you have to have more rules in order to ensure that tribalism doesn't come to blows. But he kind of flips that on its head. It's an interesting thought experiment, though I just think there should be liberty at all levels. He just takes for granted that we need to have rulers, which is strange considering that he really was, and I don't blame him, I'm not saying this in a sarcastic way, very protective, complimentary of the fact that, this tight-knit Jewish community that he's a member of. But it's kind of strange that he's like saying the more people are different, the less rules you need because they can't all agree on them. And he's assuming that you all agree on them locally, but if you agree on them, you don't need the state. So I don't think you need this abundance of rules at any level, and never mind need. Because again, he's coming at it without expressly saying so, except for a little bit. from a utilitarian. I'm coming at it from a strictly natural rights-based point of view, otherwise known as deontology. That freedom is good and right in its own right. It doesn't have to produce good results. However, I'm going to give you the radical caucus talking point here, that it would be a very strange reality if doing the right thing consistently led to bad results. I don't think there's a conflict. Of course, there is a philosophical underpinning conflict between a natural rights-based view and a utilitarian view, but I think it all works out in the end that honoring natural rights does work out to bring the most good to the most people.
What's happened is that we've actually reversed it. So what's happened is that we've gotten very libertarian about sort of our local communities and very national.
What local communities do you live in? Name a local community that's very libertarian. I'll wait. Okay. Crickets.
About the top level of government.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, well, our local community, we got to defund the police. On our local community, I don't want anybody telling me.
That's a talking point. And the people who advocate that also believe that not just locally, but state police and federalities, okay? Border patrol, whatever. I don't know what fantasy like he's been reading, but the defund the police movement doesn't just believe in defunding the police at the local level. They believe all levels of law enforcement.
Can do in the privacy of my own home. But on the federal level, man.
Okay, yes. That is not, though, some kind of libertarian ideal on the local level, because even though, yes, your home is locally situated, there are federal laws that reach into the privacy of your home. Marijuana is still federally scheduled as a Schedule 1 drug. So that doesn't follow.
I want the federal government subsidizing every single thing I do, regulating every single thing that I do in my house. Well, that's the area where we disagree on everything. So why are we granting extraordinary powers to a government that's distant from us and governs 330 million people?
So here's what I love about that.
Wait, I think that came out wrong. I think he meant what he loved about what Ben was saying, not loved about a federal government controlling every aspect of our life.
This is a new idea. It's
also a bit of a different take on liberty.
It's an affirmative vision, though, and I love it. So is that the one?
It's an affirmative. What does that even mean? I find these political talking heads, they use these buzzwords. What does it mean? It's an affirmative vision. What do you mean? It's the way I'm taking it. You could say that to a leftist. That's an affirmative vision. You could say that to anybody who just put forth their case and why they think it would work. Man, that's an affirmative vision, man. Like, what?
I'm like 100% behind it. I don't know. Yeah. I need to process that. There's a lot there.
I mean, I think that what that comes down to also is a fundamental difference in how conservatives think about liberty. So conservatives
Okay, we're going to stop right there. I should have brought an article down with me. Well, one thing about that dude, Offer Nave says he finds that dude kind of douchey. I don't know him, but I'm noticing he's got the Charlie Kirk forehead going on there. What is it with conservatives with like the million-mile-high foreheads? Is it just me? Like, am I just like zoned in on foreheads? Ben doesn't have that, but the other dude does. I'm just getting Charlie Kirk vibes. Now I completely forgot what I was going to say because I am halfway through my... Oh, there was an article I should have brought down. I will probably do a separate show on this article because now we are getting a lot of attention from conservatives. And I'm starting to hear the conservative talking point again. Not from Ben. Just in general. Particularly, I hear it when I was doing the door knocking. Where if I'm talking to a more conservative person, they'll be like, well, they don't mean it in my race because I'm in a nonpartisan race, but at higher races, oh, all libertarians do is take votes away from conservatism, or that libertarianism is a subset of conservatism. No, it isn't. He's going to tell you in one sense, and I agree with Ben here on a difference between conservatism and libertarianism, but there's a really, really good article and that I have saved from back when I was a brand new libertarian, and in a future show, maybe even tomorrow, I don't know, I've got more door knocking to do tomorrow. We're going to segue. Brief commercial interruption here. Wayne and I got halfway through all the libertarians in Castle Rock. We're going to have to spend another afternoon tomorrow finishing that door knocking list. So I might not have as much time to do multiple shows tomorrow because I am doing the Dragon Show tomorrow. Okay, back on track here. The quote from that article, which again, I will have the exact quote soon, but it was something like, conservatives are all about liberty until they comprehend, or they grok, my word, they grok what liberty actually entails, and all of a sudden they're not quite so enthusiastic about liberty anymore. And NYC Jewish man, let me put this on the screen because I'm going to disagree with you and agree with you, and I'll parse it out. He says, I hope it's he, might be she. Oh no, it says Jewish man. So he says, you can be a libertarian conservative. No, you can't. No, you can't. The two philosophies are not the same. What you can be is a libertarian who is personally, and their personal life, conservative. But conservatism is a different political ideology than libertarianism. Is there some overlap? Certainly. But we also have overlap with the left. The two things are not the same. And the idea that they can be the same needs to die in a fire, screaming for its mother and asking who its daddy is. You can be a libertarian who, in your personal life, is more conservative. But you can't be a political conservative and a political libertarian. Those are two different things with some overlap, but they are different things.
Think of liberty as, you can think of it as either inherent or instrumental in terms of its value. Either liberty.
Okay, he's using inherent and instrumental instead of deontological or utilitarian. But I do think those we're using, I think they're interchangeable. The way I use those phrases and what he's using these phrases now. We'll let him continue, but he's gonna argue for instrumental liberty rather than inherent liberty from what I remember, where libertarians believe in inherent liberty.
It's good for its own sake,
Of course.
or it's good in order to
Classical
achieve something,
debate, yep.
right?
It's
and
good
so
for its own sake.
I think that for too long, a lot of conservatives have fallen into the classical liberal argument that liberty, in and of itself, is an ideal. And
See, that's it. Libertarians believe that that liberty, in and of itself, is a good. It's just inherently good, because violence, initiatory violence, is inherently bad, and that there are no rights other than negative rights. And I think Ben, if you asked him directly, he would say he believed only in negative rights, but I don't believe that.
the reality is that conservatism doesn't argue that. It argues that liberty within certain boundaries, right, ordered liberty, is a good thing.
A little bit, just enough liberty. Liberty that controlled liberty. That makes no sense. There's no such thing as controlled liberty. I'll give the expression. I need to make this on a t-shirt. Liberty is not a tame lion.
So how do you order that liberty? You order it more on the local level.
Yeah.
As you abstract up, you're going to have to allow for the possibility of more liberty, because people in San Francisco don't live like people living in Alabama.
I got you.
But the very core idea of how conservatives argue has been predicated on the wrong thing. They've been
Okay, if you think conservatives have been arguing for liberty, Ben, please give me what you're smoking, because that's some powerful stuff, dude. It's better than what I'm drinking. I don't think I could drink enough to utter the statement that conservatives have been arguing that liberty is a good in and of itself. Second shot. I've got the third one lined up. We're only, though, 2 minutes in. I will not have another drink till we're at least 5 minutes in.
Instead of balancing liberty within particular roles and communities, instead
You got to box in that liberty, you know? You can't let that liberty have liberty. You can't let that liberty have freedom. Make it make sense. Do I have my make it make sense? Where's my clips? Do I have make it make sense? Okay, let me get out my little flow chart here.
That's what she said.
No, that's what she said. I don't have... Where's make it make sense? Hold on. Let me bring up my sound effects. I know I just destroyed the spontaneity of this, but it bugs me that I can't find make it make sense. Are we going to have to go through all my sound effects here till I find it? I don't think I have it. Oh, here we go.
Make it make sense.
Exactly. Make it make sense. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense. Make it make sense. Let's say it again.
Make it make sense.
Okay.
arguing liberty is its own inherent good. And so what the left has done is they've taken that and they've turned it in on itself.
Right? Liberty we were discussing another context. So everything I have said so far, I am high conviction in. I'm now going to say some things that I'm going to tell you. My level of conviction in the things I'm about to say goes down, but I think this is a conversation we need to be having to move the ball forward in the movement. Okay, so my concern, so what I love about that is actually a coherent affirmative vision. It also, another thing I love about it, actually, before I get to my concern about it, another thing I love about it is, another reason I don't call myself a libertarian anymore, which is a totally different reason.
And you did it one time, you haven't shown any understanding of what libertarianism is. So allegedly you may have called yourself that, but you never were, by the words of your own mouth, because you don't understand it. I know this is an expression I use. I know it's kind of dark now and insensitive, but I have no filter. I could call myself the Queen of England. It doesn't make me her, particularly since I'm still alive.
Than the failures of the individual standard bearers of the movement, which is what I discussed before, is that libertarianism has nothing to say.
Wait, stop. First of all, ideologies don't say anything. So let's just translate that to libertarians have nothing to say. Just stop. Have you ever met a libertarian? Because there's a lot of things you can say about us. But saying that we have nothing to say about anything is not something keeping our mouth shut is not one of the things that libertarians are known for. We probably should have nothing to say on some things, but we have an awful lot to say. So, right there, dude, but let's let him continue because it gets even more ludicrous. And it gets even more... Yeah, Bunchy, I feel your pain. So let's hear about libertarianism has nothing to say.
About what it is we do in that world that's...
Wait, go back. What the hell happened to his head? Was he was like having a Hillary convulsion looking at fireworks. Let's go back.
Another reason I don't call myself a libertarian anymore, which is a totally different reason than the failures of the individual standard bearers of the movement, which is what I discussed before, is that libertarianism has nothing to say about what it is we do in that.
What was that bobblehead? Was he having a convulsion? Oh, I wish I could slow speed that. Okay, let him finish his sentence. It's almost as dumb as families are communist.
World that's unshackled from government restraint. Great.
Right.
Let's do a snap.
Libertarians have nothing to say about what we do when we're you do what? Libertarians have plenty to say. This guy can't envision a world unshackled from government, and he needs me to tell him what he should do. Doesn't he see the problem isn't what libertarians have to say or not? It's that you're asking another person, what do I do with my liberty? What do you want to do with your liberty? What? And libertarians have plenty to say, because there are libertarians who are much more socially conservative. And they'll say, we need to rebuild the family, we need to do this, we need to do that. There are libertarians more like myself that are very much deconstructionists. And I say, well, we can do this, we can do that. The fact is, as long as you're not committing aggression against the negative rights of other people, that's what you do. And you find other people of like mind, and you will naturally congregate in communities, like Ben's example earlier of the very conservative Jewish community that he's a part of. That's what you do. Libertarians say this all the time. And I want to answer New York Jewish man's comment here from Twitch. No, I didn't just prove that. I proved that you didn't understand what I said. So I'll repeat it. I think you really are going to need to rewind the show and listen to it again. First of all, because I did define libertarianism at the beginning, but you might not have been here. I said you can be a conservative socially in your personal life that has nothing to do with the government. But when you start dealing with the government, that's a political philosophy. As a political philosophy, not a personal one, libertarianism and conservatism are completely different things. These words are not monolithic. They refer to different areas of life. I am referring to political libertarianism. Well, if it makes no sense, then perhaps this isn't the show for you, and I wish you well, because you've basically just been insulting me in comments. I've been trying to engage with you. I'm not going to any further. Okay, let's continue.
When we got there.
Right.
Okay, what do we do as human beings now?
Right. That's right.
Maybe the Torah has something to say about that. Maybe the Bhagavad Gita has something to say about that. Okay, maybe the Bible has something to say about that.
Okay, yes. And you guys would have different points of view on that as conservatives. Does that mean conservatives have nothing to say? Or does it mean that you will follow your own traditions or your own beliefs as long as they are consistent within your worldview? Because what the Bhagavad Gita has to say is not the same thing that the Torah would have to say, yet both of you agree that you can both be conservatives, with someone being a Hindu and someone being an Orthodox Jew. It's no different in libertarianism. Once you are free from the shackles of the state, if you want to be I can't say I know a lot about Hinduism, so I'm probably going to say something completely ignorant here. But I assume there's probably personally liberal Hindus and personally conservative Hindus. Maybe those terms make no sense in Hinduism. I confess complete ignorance there. They certainly do with Christianity. They certainly do with Judaism. They even certainly do in Islam. Those things, you just follow what it is that is your personal beliefs. All libertarians say is as long as you are not injuring anyone else's negative rights. Conservatives believe in community rights, not voluntary community rights, inherent community rights. For instance, now Ben doesn't hold to this, so I will give him credit for this, but a lot of conservatives, particularly drug warrior conservatives, will say that drugs need to be outlawed because they harm the community. There's no such thing. There is only individuals and individuals that may voluntarily band together, but no group of people has any more rights to anything than any one of its individual members. And you don't have a right to not have people act in a way that you don't like. You do have a right to keep them out of your particular private club and things like that. But look, I just went on now for about 5 minutes telling you that libertarians actually do have quite a bit to say as to what comes after the state is gone. I can't help, crap, I wrote his name down. I don't want to disrespect them. Vivek, God, I know I'm mispronouncing his name. We'll just call him V's. V's lack of imagination in this regard.
But libertarianism has nothing to say about that.
That's right.
And as a human being, as a citizen, as an agent in the world, as a thinking person, as a person who aspires to be a moral person, I care about the answers to those questions in a way that a libertarian is not necessarily saying the wrong answer or the right answer. There's just silence on that question.
There is not silence. All it says is that the political philosophy doesn't give an answer there because that's not the role of political philosophy. That's the role of your personal morals. That's the role of the morals of your community. That's the role of your relationship with your God, if you have one. That's the role of your church. That's the role of your family. I just said a whole lot about it. What you want is some kind of dictate from on high. No, libertarians will not give you a dictate from on high. Their dictate from on high is be free. Just don't harm anybody's negative rights.
And so the idea of what you might call virtue, okay?
Right.
That becomes pretty important for the full scope of the way a human being is to live his life.
Are you suggesting that libertarians have nothing to say about virtue? Hold on, I need to look up this term. There's an entire school of thought that I might actually align with even more than deontology, but I haven't studied enough. And I always mispronounce it, but it's called virtue-based ethics. It's like edemenism. Does anyone know that word? Roderick Long subscribes to it. And I always mispronounce it. I think it's... Let me see if I can find it here. No, I can't. Because I can't remember how to spell it. But there is a whole other school that in English is called virtue ethics. But there is a Greek word for it that I'm not thinking of right now, that I probably hold to a lot more than deontology. But I haven't studied it enough. I don't switch ships quickly. All right, so to say, and the ultimate in virtue in a libertarian political view is non-aggression. That is the most virtuous that a human being can be. That is a moral statement. That is virtue. So libertarianism has at its core a virtue. It's not simply conserving something. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of, eudaimonics. It's something like that. That name on YouTube that needs a vowel. Can I buy a vowel, please, GSDLMJ? You need some vowels in your name. Yeah, it's spelled like E-A-U-D. You know exactly what I'm saying. But yeah, that's virtue ethics. Deontological is duty-based ethics. But I think there's a big overlap between them because you have a duty to virtue.
But it's even more important even in the capitalist worldview and extracting the virtue of capitalism itself, where one of the things that I've frequently argued to sort of, I would say, confused conservative responses, and confused for good reasons, is that virtue is not a product of capitalism. So there are the...
Because that's like saying the taste of raspberries is not a product of the color blue. Blue doesn't taste like anything. It's a category error. Capitalism can be used for good. It can be used for bad. It depends on the human actors in it. Capitalism in and of itself, I'm not going to say it's immoral, but it's amoral. Maybe that's not even exactly correct, because I do think it's a moral system in that it deals with the voluntary exchange of goods. But you can be predatory about it. Like I've said before, libertarian dystopia is possible. God, for him to say that libertarians have nothing to say about how we live our lives, I need to look up this. I want to put this on the screen, on a different screen, because I have an awful lot to say about what comes next. I did a whole keynote speech about it in Kansas. It was called, what was it called? The Humanitarian Responsibility of Freedom. That was the name of a talk I gave, which was all about what comes next, that libertarian dystopia is possible, and that we have a responsibility to be humanitarians. So I want to stick this up on the screen in case any of you guys would like to take a listen to this. I would super encourage it. And if I remember, I'll put it up in the show cards. Let me open a new screen here for just 1 second. You're looking at one of my other camera angles. Forgive me, but here it is. Up at the top here, you can see the humanitarian responsibility of freedom. This is my answer to the question. And I was watching, you could see here, you laugh, you lose. I listen, I watch a lot of different programs. But you can see here that I have a lot to say about what comes next. And I end that speech, by the way, if I remember correctly, quoting quite a bit of scripture. Let me go back to this.
They're the true
let me stop this.
Pro-capitalist.
Let me go back to this screen here for a second, because I want to expound upon that a little bit. In that speech, on the humanitarian responsibility of freedom, I call the non-humanitarian view of freedom as childish. And I quote the Apostle Paul, who said, that when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I act as a child. But now that I'm a grown man, I have put away childish things. And I encourage libertarians to put away childish things. And I ended that speech with the prayer of St. Francis, which is a selfless prayer that says things like, may I seek not so much to be understood as to understand, and added it with the sarcastic response, but turning it on its head, of in the story of Cain and Abel. I said, we are our brother's keeper. Because if you remember in Genesis, he said to God, what am I, my brother's keeper? Yes, we are our brother's keeper. True freedom and human flourishing has a humanitarian responsibility. Now, isn't that funny? That guy said we have nothing to say about what comes next. And I just talked and did a whole talk all over the country about what comes next. What comes next is human dignity. That is what comes next. But you can't force that on people. Okay, let's go back to the talk.
To make the argument that that is the virtue, right?
Right.
And it's a powerful case, and there are aspects of it that I'm deeply sympathetic to, but I'm not there. I believe that virtue is a precondition for capitalism.
Adam Smith
to
said.
matter.
Okay, I loved what he said there. Because in my talk, The Humanitarian Responsibility of Freedom, I said something very similar, but I didn't say it about capitalism. I said freedom is a necessary but insufficient precondition for human happiness and human flourishing. That merely being free doesn't guarantee paradise. It is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient one. That you have to bring other things to it. You have to bring voluntary human virtue. So he's saying this about capitalism, so we might even be saying the same thing here. Freedom alone is not enough for human flourishing, because people will use and can use their freedom to be absolute assholes.
Adam Smith absolutely said so. And people forget that about Adam
Yeah,
Smith.
theory of moral sentiments comes before Wealth of
Came
Nations.
before Wealth of Nations.
Yeah.
And not just in temporal sequence, but in principle.
primary thought. Yeah, that's
primary
right.
thought.
What he's trying to say is in logical priority. I'm bringing in now my Christianity to it, where you talk about the Trinity, which confuses a lot of non-Christian because there's a logical priority in the Godhead rather than a temporal priority. But I understand exactly what he's saying here.
And so the question for me is, actually, even if you think about the modern, it's interesting about that point. I mean, modern social media, I think, calls that bluff. What modern social media, the algorithmized version of it, manages to do is to take those human insecurities and to pick at them so repetitively and so artfully with algorithmic force behind it that it is able to take advantage of psychic.
Okay, we're going to stop 1 second because we're now past the 5-minute mark, so I can open my last little drink here. I don't have enough to drink for this episode, that is for certain. But I think I have not listened this far. We are now in territory. Now that I'm listening back to it, I listened up to about the 5-minute mark, and we are past that at this point. But I think what he's about to bring up is though I wouldn't call social media purely a capitalistic phenomena, but I actually don't think we have any purely capitalistic phenomena in this country. The government has its stinky little fingers in everything. We live under crony capitalism, not laissez-faire capitalism, which is what libertarianism advocates. We do not advocate corporatism, and in fact, I'm pretty well known in saying that I don't think corporations are even remotely libertarian. I am completely opposed to the idea of corporations. But in whatever passes for capitalism in today's society, social media, in the way social media companies do capitalize on insecurities, like he is going to say, I do think that's an example of virtue being sucked out of something. But let's let him continue. I have a feeling I'm not going to have as much to comment here because I think they're getting past the libertarian part, but we'll see.
Securities that exist in the real world but are able to be amplified in the digital world, that give us a window into your soul to know more about you than you know about yourself, as a vehicle to sell you lots of stuff. And
Right.
multi-trillion-dollar industries built on the back of that principle.
I am going to stop for a second because I think there's also an opportunity for virtue here, though. While these algorithms and these companies could be trying to exploit all our insecurities, I do think humans are more noble than that. And it's actually an opportunity to rise above it and reject it. It's almost like I said, what happened to me last year where I was at a crossroads where I could have fallen apart or I could have become stronger. And I do think it's a choice. I do think it's a choice of the will to choose one path over the other. And I do think we can choose the nobler path in the face of this great temptation, in the face of the serpent in the garden.
So when people say things like, and Republicans are kind of confused about this issue at times too, but we'll say things like, well, Facebook knew that teen girls were suffering worse body image insecurity issues as a consequence of using Instagram or whatever and anger management issues on their platform, and they didn't do something about it. I think that we actually risk falling into the same trap of the other side where, to me, I don't want it to be a capitalist's job or Facebook's job to manage female body.
I agree with him. I think this is an opportunity for the individual humans to listen to the angel of their better selves. We all do have a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other. I got him in an unfortunate pause there. We can all do that, so I'm not trying to make fun of him. But yeah, no, that's not the capitalist job. That's the community's job. That's the church's job. That's the family's job. God, for libertarians having nothing to say about all of this, I've had an awful lot to say.
Insecurity issues. That's the role of the family or religion or whatever.
Oh my God, didn't listen to this before.
Institutions that exist outside of the capitalist sphere of our lives. A crude definition of virtues. Look, I think capitalism, I often say, delivers on its promise for a society most completely when our wants actually match our needs.
Okay. I did hear Dave deal with this point. That's a soundbite that means absolutely nothing in the first world. I will repeat what Dave said on this point. Our needs are quite primal. Food, shelter, and clothing. In the first world, we have gone so beyond meeting our needs. Our needs are met 1,000,000 times over. So you're virtue signaling here, dude. You are trying to sound righteous, but the fact is, our needs are long since met. You don't need to be on YouTube. You don't need to be having a discussion with a famous personality like Ben Shapiro. You don't need to have a computer. You don't need to have a closet full of clothing, which I'm sure you have. There's a lot of things I could just look at you right now and go, your needs are long since met. Don't give me that. Capitalism is at its best where our wants don't exceed our needs. Our needs are animal, basic, and primal.
And to the extent that our wants diverge from our needs, that can probably explain most of what you would complain about when it comes to the promise of modern American capitalism. And that delta, that daylight, might be a crude proxy for this word we call
that's
virtue.
right. That's right. I think that the capitalism, the one virtue that it creates is through repeat iterations of honesty. Because if you jack somebody, then they're not going to do.
Yeah, that's true. It cultivates a lot of virtues. It cultivates. So
responsibility, thrift,
it cultivates a lot of individual lowercase v virtues. But I think of an uppercase v virtue, the cultivation of a human, of
a soul.
Okay, this guy's trying to be Jordan Peterson and failing. This guy is is when you order Jordan Peterson from Wish.
Right. That's exactly that pre-exists.
No, capitalism is good at the things that it's good at, and this is why I've never been a fan of these sort of two cheers for capitalism mentality. Only because I think that you're asking of capitalism something that it never said it was going to deliver.
Whoa, you get that about capitalism, but you don't get that about libertarianism. Libertarianism is a political philosophy. It's not going to tell you what to do with your freedom, other than don't commit aggression against other people. But then you whine and moan that we don't tell you more than that. But that's asking of it something it never said it was going to deliver. Just like capitalism.
Said it was going to deliver. When you ask that, bad things actually, all kinds of unexpected bad things happen. So we're there. So now the issue that I have, and I just want to think through this stuff, but
Yeah.
the issue that I have with your sort of worldview of communist family, communitarian community, onward up
The
with state
family
and
is
the
not
nation,
communist.
it's an elegant view. It's an alluring view. There's a lot to like about it, but I think that there's something unique to the level of identity of being a citizen of a nation
Oh, God.
that is.
Hold on. I'm triggered. Okay. We are starting now to really get into the difference between libertarians and conservatives. If I'm going to define nation very loosely here. Do you mean of a tribe? And I don't mean tribe in the negative sense. I mean tribe as in a voluntary community of people. Yes, there is something very enriching to the human spirit about that. But if you just mean because you happen to pop out of a vagina at a certain latitude and longitude that you're the citizen of a nation that you had no choice in, no, right there we're seeing the difference. Now, you can love your country and you can love your countrymen without being like fetishizing this. Well, I'm an American because, I popped out of my mom on American soil. That's not a voluntary association. And you can still love fellow Americans and hold that. In fact, it's perfectly natural to love your countrymen and hate your country.
Apart and beyond the identity that comes from being a member of a citizen or a constituent in a state. So I liked where you were in the local community level, but I think one.
A constituent of a state. Can you say cog in a machine in another way? I think you just did. And we're really seeing the difference right now.
Things that I think is missing. So in my new book, kind of play on David Hume had this thought experiment called The Missing Shade of Blue. I call this the missing shade of red for our conservative movement, is the revival of civic duty.
For sure.
As a means, but it's
What do you mean by civic duty? Do you mean a duty to the state? Because that is the context of what you're saying. If you mean civic duty as a duty to humanity, or a duty to your neighbor, or a duty to your family, or a duty to your community, that is entirely different. But you are basically arguing for nationalism and blind patriotism. No, I reject that.
duty that I think has to apply at its most powerful level at the level of the nation, not just at the level of the community, but the level of the nation.
I think this is one of the questions about kind of where we're going as a country. Meaning, I think it was easier to make the case at the level of the nation when you didn't have 330 million people with a wide variety of perspectives on what the nation actually constitutes.
And evolutionarily wise, I'm sorry for no one here, if not, I'm sure it's not no one. If some people here don't believe in evolution, even though I'm a Christian, I do believe in it. And that's even the wrong word because it's not a faith thing, it's a science thing. But in anthropology, there's a lot of evidence behind the fact that, and we even see this, when something terrible happens to people you know or people in your community, it's a tragedy. When something terrible happens to somebody thousands of miles away, it's a statistic. You can't have that kind of close connection with other people. We are, in a very real sense, and I don't mean this in the negative sense, tribal. That we can really have only these really close bonds with a certain number of people. And when it gets beyond that, it's just beyond our monkey brains. But instead, what this guy is advocating without realizing is he's sublimating it to this kind of like super father figure of the state.
When there was an actual creed, for example.
That's right.
Then,
No, but isn't that a case? Is that not a case for reviving that creed?
no, for sure. But I think that the question is going to be if we can't.
You're seeing the difference
right? If
now.
this goes back to what time it is, if there's half the nation that fundamentally believes that creed is mistaken, which I think is
might
probably
be
the
there.
case, right?
Might
I mean,
be there, yeah.
if you
More than
believe
30%.
right? If you believe the Christopher Caldwell argument that basically the second Constitution is at war with the first Constitution, and many Americans believe in the second Constitution and actually don't like the first Constitution, then you have to start looking at the United States more in terms of, is it like the EU? Are we really actually a bunch of separate nations that are under the
We are.
auspices of a broader federal? I mean, that's how we sort of started, right?
It makes me. It saddens
sad,
me as an
but-
American. I mean,
Did you just say that the way we started? Okay, I don't think they meant to say what they just said, but it was very revealing. So Ben said we're kind of like a bunch of nations under some kind of overarching federal government, and then said that's kind of the way we started, which that is what the federalistic system allegedly is. And then he said that's kind of sad, but I thought that's what conservatives wanted to get back to. I mean, that really is going to be the only way to save this country, is to get back to the original founding idea. But too many people just don't believe in that. And even though I'm openly an anarchist, so obviously I don't believe in nations to begin with. But if we're going to have one, a much better arrangement is the original arrangement of much more sovereign states, loosely a confederation of states. That's a localization argument.
even when you talk about the fall of Rome, people talk about the fall of Rome, whether the Roman Empire lasted hundreds of years or whether it lasted over 1,000.
Right.
Depends on whether you actually
Include the Eastern
break
Empire.
of the Eastern Empire.
That's right.
Exactly. So in a certain sense,
I forgot about my pizza in the oven.
It made my
Wayne, if you're still
heart cry a
watching,
little bit as I wrote this part of my book.
did
but
I
maybe America will be
burn
the same way.
my bagel
depends on-
bites?
but whether the
And
American
that's usually
Empire,
what happens, right?
whether
I
the
mean-
American experiment lasted 250 years or whether it lasts 1,000, may involve a fissure of what in the way they hold the Roman Empire was different.
And
than
it
the
doesn't mean
Eastern
there's a
Roman
civil
Empire.
war or something, but it
No,
does
it
mean
just-
that,
it just may go a
that we just
different
kind of go, our own different ways.
So I acknowledge that possibility. Maybe being a naive optimist, it is my hope, and I think our window is short for.
Yeah.
I mean, this might be like the next 8 years to determine the answer to this question. I hope we're not there yet.
And that's where we differ. I think we do need to get back into much more sovereign localism. I mean, obviously, that's not my preferred system, but in dealing with the options that are on the table, it's a better one.
I think that there's an opportunity to still revive a common creed.
Okay, well, the second half of the show, let me go back to my main screen here. So the second half of the show didn't deal so much with libertarianism, but though it did highlight some really fundamental difference in proving my point that libertarianism is not conservatism. It was really the first 5 minutes that betrayed a fundamental misunderstanding of libertarianism. Now, do I think if those two properly understood libertarianism, they would be libertarians? No. I think the second half of the show proved that they fundamentally have conservative views. But I really do wish they wouldn't straw man libertarianism. Ben Shapiro has demonstrated no understanding of libertarianism as a coherent whole, even though he does bring up some libertarian doctrines a lot. Like he has said before, I'm not sure if he has said it for all drugs, but he's said before that he's very much in favor of legalization of at least a lot of drugs, that the drug war has been a failure. Well, that's a very libertarian idea. But it's so strange, but I think he holds to that because of a utilitarian view. I don't know. I don't think he's particularly consistent with this. So that was kind of fun. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to be doing a little bit more of this, of breaking down some things. So I want to go over that article I mentioned about the differences between conservatism and libertarianism and how they're not the same thing. And if I have time tomorrow, I will do it tomorrow. If not, it will be next week. I just need to print it out. But remember, I'm starting a new job next week. But I just need to print it out and do that. I also, as I've kind of teased on Thursday, I think excuse me, I burped. I kind of teased the other day that there was some really terrible statements made by Jesse Waters on Fox News about dealing with the homeless that I wanted to bring up. But that's going to be it for this evening. I thank you guys for helping me improve my sound. I'm always looking to do that. I actually do have a mixing board and professional mic, so there's no excuse for bad sound. I'm giving us a few minutes, as I always do at the end, to see if there's any other comments or any questions that might even be slightly off topic. Now's the time. Otherwise, we will get going. I've got more campaign work to do. I've got to send over to the LPCO. I already sent them the list of the unaffiliated in my district, but we're working on some walking lists. They're trying to get me volunteers. If any of you listening happen to be in Castle Rock and you would like to, or in Douglas County, Colorado, and would like to volunteer for my campaign, I definitely need the help. It was me and Wayne out there today, door knocking. All right, y'all, I don't think there's anything else, and thank you so much, Doc Sexy, and I'll see you tomorrow, at least for the Dragon Show, even if I can't do the conservatism versus libertarianism. We definitely will be doing House of the Dragon tomorrow, as I do each week. All right, guys, have an awesome night, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business.